Excuse me, Bonnie. Please look in the tanks and tell me what you see.
Oh, certainly, Zecoa. Alright, let's see. Oh, hey, Zecoa. Can you
Yes.
see fish?
Georgina! Da, 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 da. Da, da, da,
I was not
da.
fucking expecting that, but okay. That was fucking hilarious. Hey, everybody, this is, Bonnie. This is, take two, sorry.
No. We're keeping that in. We're unprofessionals, all right? This is no script.
Yeah, this is not script.
We have no script for this. We can always edit this out.
Yeah.
By the
Anyway,
way,
take two. Take
this is
two.
Bonnie and this is Zecoa, where we bring old dead memes back from the grave.
Oh, shut up. Anyway, hey guys, this is Bonnie here, along with my co-host.
Zecoa the Diesel. I already said my name twice. You can
So,
say it 3 times if you want.
welcome back to the 4th episode of the Really Useful Podcast. And today we got another good episode for you guys. Tank Engine Thomas again.
Kind of a little weird title when you kind of think about it. You could have just called it Thomas the Tank Engine again, or at least Thomas the Tank Engine 2.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. So, Tank Engine Thomas again. This book,
This book definitely has set up a little bit more on both the railway series and the settings. It's actually the first time where it's like, we're actually going to be on a different, part of the railway instead of the same railway we've been used to so far with the first 3 books.
Yeah, definitely. And this book is very important as well because this is the first book where we actually get to see the first seeds planted on what Sodor will become.
Pretty much. We're definitely going to get more into it a little later. But yes, this is the book where definitely you're going to see Audrey, coming up with ideas about how the railway is going to be like once she starts making, the island of Sodor and everything. Which technically did start it a little bit, but it's not going to get fully realized just yet. The only thing that's really fully realized in Sodor is just Thomas's branch line, and that's really about it.
Yeah, pretty much. So, to start off this episode, I wanted to do something a little bit different that we don't usually do. I think we did it only once in the first episode of the podcast, but I don't think we've done it ever since. And that is basically talk about our experiences with the book prior to starting the podcast.
Well, I mean, good luck with you on that, because, pretty much, if you want my experience with these books in a nutshell, then it's just basically, I watched them online, I listened to someone narrated them, the end.
Well, I do remember reading this book when I was 9, thanks to the Thomas the Tank Engine story collection. Like I said, that book sucks. But I remember reading that book, and as a kid, I don't know if it was the TV nostalgia or something, but I kind of felt burnt out reading these stories. I think I've seen the episodes so many times that by the time I read the original stories, I still felt burnt out reading them.
Yeah, that will basically do it for you. This is coming from someone that, has seen, basically has seen season 1, season 1 episodes sometimes before, but not all the time and everything, so, I wasn't basically too burnt out, and I think it's also because I think I might have taken, maybe a little break in between and, listening to the audios and everything of these books, but, who knows.
Yeah, I grew up listening to New Controller 01's narrations. I think
same here, and I think that's basically how all of us basically, listen to those railway series, for those that didn't have the books in the first place.
Yeah, it was thanks to New Controller 1 that, I could listen to the books that I did not have at the time.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and so, yeah, I had a good weekend because I went to see Journey this week. You can tell
Nice.
my voice that I'm a little bit hoarse after seeing all those greatest hit songs. It was a good show.
And what did that have to do with this book?
I have no idea, but I just wanted to point it out because in case anybody is asking about my hoarse voice.
Alrighty. Well, I mean, you can always just say that, you ate a bunch of fish and somehow, they got a horse. At least that way, at least it would have stayed on topic.
Yeah. So, I couldn't find too much information on this book in terms of the history portion. The only thing that I could find is basically that, this is the first book where, the Reverend Wilbur Audrey, started developing Sodor a little bit, and the first thing that he developed was a map of Thomas's branch line, and it's...
Which actually, the whole idea of how Thomas's branch line, actually is a little funny story behind it, because It actually does tie into the very last story, which, do we want to talk about it now, or wait till we get to that story?
Well, we'll get to that story when we get to it, because I think everybody's dying to get to that story.
Alright.
So am I.
So am I as well.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, this is the first book where we're introduced to Thomas's branch line, and the first book in which Thomas's coaches are named.
Pretty much, and first time we also get to see characters that are not engines.
Pretty much, and two memorable characters.
This one has definitely shown a lot of firsts and such. So, yeah, I guess that's why Thomas carries at number 1.
Yeah, pretty much. So, since we're gonna leave some of the important information for the stories, why don't we jump into them?
Alrighty, alright. So last time I went first with the very first story, so you're gonna go first with the first story of Tengen Thomas again.
Alright, the first story we got is Thomas and the Guard. Alright, so Thomas and the Guard is basically a simple story. It's basically a story where Thomas is basically on his branch line. Then one day he's impatient waiting for Gordon. Yeah, for Gordon. I refuse to acknowledge that that's Henry.
No, it's Henry. Come on. If the book says it's Henry, it's Henry. I don't care how much of a fuck up Dobby is. It's Henry.
I refuse to acknowledge that. I refuse to acknowledge that's Henry.
Okay, how about this? Let's just call him what the Railway Series book club calls him. Benry. That's Benry.
Genry?
Yeah, Benry.
Alright, Benry. Alright, so he's waiting for Benry, and then Thomas leaves impatiently, but unfortunately, when the guard blows his whistle, he trips over an old lady's umbrella. And, Thomas...
It's like a cartoon character, and yeah, Thomas is already running out of the station.
Thomas leaves the station, however, Annie and Clarabelle try to stop Thomas, but they can't because they don't have the guard to apply their brakes. And it's not until they get to the signal where they basically realize that they left the guard behind. So the guard comes running all the way behind them.
That guard had better hold that, Thomas didn't run down too far, because if he did, I would feel so sorry for him. I would definitely give him, a bonus raise or something.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I will give him a fucking race.
Especially running down that one singular track just to catch up with him.
Yeah, definitely. So after that, Thomas apologizes, and then, the story ends. So I like this story pretty much. Perhaps as the TV nostalgia sipping in here, I do like this story a little bit. And I prefer the book version over the one over the episode, basically, because I remember you said something in your season 1 review where basically the UK version didn't make a lick of sense.
Well, at least yeah. In terms of so keep in mind, when Britt and David, were adapting, the stories for TV. Wilbur makes sure that they were adapting his books strictly, not necessarily word from word, or at least they didn't have to stick too close to it, but they still had to stick close enough to where they kept the original line from the book, where basically after Thomas leaves the guard behind and the guard catches up, he says to Thomas that it wasn't his fault, although it didn't really make too much sense because the guard didn't really trip or anything. Thomas is basically just basically started off quickly on his own, leaving him behind on accident. So basically it is Thomas's fault.
Yeah, but the guard says that it wasn't his fault, but in the US version he acknowledges that it was Thomas's fault.
Yeah, basically just says to him just basically he basically forgives him and everything, just basically saying that we all make mistakes and everything, it's kind of no big deal. I had to run I basically had to run almost like a whole fucking marathon just to catch up with you. And somehow by the time I was done running, I had a glass of milk. Where did milk even come from?
That's basically the whole story, and I don't want to give my rating very quickly because I want to talk about something that irritates me to no end. And I think you know what it is.
Right. Well, what irritates you today? What is grinding your gears today, Bonnie?
What the fuck is up with Henry?
Yeah, okay. No, wait. It's not Henry. Benry.
But yeah, Benry. What the hell is up with him? Okay, so do you want to tell everybody, the story behind this?
So, all right, basically, like, just to give, as much of a nutshell version as we can and everything. Basically, when Dolby was, illustrating, the part where, like, Thomas was waiting for, like, Benry and everything, he basically screwed up to where, like, he had pretty much Gordon's original buffers. He had the copper cat funnel, which, fun fact, he did not have in, like, the re-illustrated versions of Thomas the Tank Engine. But it was seen in the original, so I don't know why he brought it back and such. If it wasn't there,
I actually did. At the very beginning of the second episode of the podcast, I actually put the illustrations by Reginald Payne, so people can compare them to the final illustrations. So if you're still having a little bit of doubt as to what we're talking about, go back to episode 2 and take a look.
Pretty much. But yeah, because Dolby fucked up again and everything, and Wilbur basically had pull him away to give him like a good beating and such. Basically, kids kids and parents were writing like what the fuck's up with Benry and everything, and Wilbur was just basically like, okay, you know what? Next story, Henry is gonna be green again. All right, I'm not gonna put up with this anymore.
And basically he wrote a story as to why Henry had the square buffers instead of the usual round buffers most of the engines had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just basically because Henry basically got into an accident and had to get some spare buffers.
Pretty much. So.
Which is why I still say that even if James was also painted blue and everything. This it's definitely most likely that Wilbur will probably have him painted red again too after a moment like that.
Without question, absolutely without question. So I don't have too much to say on Thomas and the Guard. I think the story is written pretty well for the most part. If there's any nitpick I had to give to the story, it'll basically have to be that it's just pretty short and it ends pretty quickly.
It does end a little quickly, but to be fair, it doesn't end it doesn't feel like the ending it just kind of felt too short. It felt like it basically felt like the story just felt too rushed on the other book from last week.
Yeah, pretty much. But however, unlike James and the Express, for example, this story kind of falls into the category of Edward's Day Out, where yes, it's a simple story, but it's very memorable, and you can see Thomas learning as a character. That even he can make mistakes because of his own, impatience.
Pretty much, and actually, yeah. Let's just talk about that a little bit because, it's interesting that you brought that up. Even though Thomas did mature a little bit, and actually, I shouldn't say a little bit. He did mature, greatly as the story went on, in his last book and everything. In this book, it's he's still he still has that young childlike, personality to him. So it wasn't he became full mature or full wise just yet.
Yeah.
As Barney basically mentioned, he still gets overexcited. He still gets he sometimes still feels like he wants to do something just because just because he just wants to do it and everything, and he still doesn't think as logically as the others do at times. And we're definitely going to see this in the next two stories as well too. And yeah, as Bonnie says, even in this story, he's still a little impatient because now that he's got his branch line and everything, he wants to still prove to the Fire Control that he's still the best, and he basically can still do the job that he was basically rewarded to do and everything. And I can imagine I can imagine even as someone as young, not just as a kid, but say a young adult just recently got promoted to manager or something, and then just a year or even 2 years from now, I can imagine that can that can pretty much get to their head to a point where they feel the pressure or feel they have to do their best and try not to mess up too many times.
Yeah, pretty much, unless you're someone like SpongeBob.
Pretty much.
that gets excited even for the smallest thing ever. But yeah, Thomas and the Guard, I don't have anything else to say, so I'm gonna give the story an 8 out of 10. I was originally considering giving it a 7, but after I thought about comparing it to Edward's Day Out, it's a simple story, but Thomas learns from his mistakes, and it's a memorable story. So yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8.
All right, so you give it an 8. I do actually do have to agree with you. Like, compared to Edward's Day Out, so like, with Edward's Day Out, it was just more of an introduction to like, the story itself as a whole. There wasn't really like any lessons to teach per se. It was just more like an intro. Whereas Thomas and the Guard, where it's just like it's an intro to Thomas's branch line as well as like, to Annie and Clara, which, I'll talk about them in a little bit. But it's an intro that still also has like, character moments too as well. Like, it still also has like, a little lesson, like, Bonnie said, for Thomas to learn at the end. And you feel like he actually did learn it and such. I will say too, like, the illustrations, at least for Thomas's branch line, are really gorgeous to look at. I actually think Dalby really did step up his game a little bit in this book. Like,
Aside from that illustration, but
yeah.
we already talked about that. Moving on.
But yeah, aside from that, mess up and everything. Thomas still looks nice and everything. His colors actually look really great, and like, and like the illustrations, anytime they're drawn and such. And like I said, the moments that you do see, stuff from his branch line, they look really good. They do really make you wish that, like, make you feel like that, like, you want to be in that same branch line with Thomas and everything. Like, it really does look amazing.
I have to agree. I absolutely love the illustrations in this book, and we're gonna get to one specific story where it has my all-time favorite illustration from this book.
Alrighty, well, I guess we'll just have to wait till we get to that story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, also going back to Annie and Clabo and everything too. I also like how the coaches were introduced, like, in the story too, and actually like the sort of like relationship they have with Thomas, almost kind of like sort of like a best friend, or even like I've heard some people compare it to like a friendly like brother sister type relationship the coaches have with Thomas, and honestly I could definitely see that. They definitely do make a very good pair and everything. That like it's no wonder why when people think of Thomas, they always picture him with Annie and Clara, because they definitely do make quite the team together.
Same applies for another character, and I think you know who I mean.
Yeah, again, we'll get to that character pretty soon too.
One of my favorite characters. One of my favorite characters, but we'll get to that book when we get to that book.
Yeah, pretty much and such. But yeah, it is definitely a little shame though that like even the classic series didn't really do too much with like Thomas and Annie and Clara all too much and everything. But even when they did, again, it still captured like the friendship down to a T and everything.
I think the CGI series pushed Annie and Clarabelle to as characters in the later CGI era, before the whole big world, big pile of shit era came out. They really
definitely. I've heard lots of praise on like what Brenner did to like Annie and Clarabelle and everything, and definitely from like what I've seen like from some of the episodes, he actually did make them more like three-dimensional characters, and actually pulled it off really well.
Oh yes, I think you haven't seen this episode, so I won't spoil it. But I think the best episode that they really gave the focus to Annie and Clarabelle was season 20's The Rail Car and Coaches.
I think I know which one you're talking about, but I have not seen it just yet. So, but so far, like my favorite appearance from Annie and Clarabelle, at least in terms of like CGI series, again from what I remember and everything. I actually do like the one where like the bird the bird watcher and everything not accidentally pulls like the emergency cable and everything. I actually like how Thomas still holds a grudge against him, because like he did hurt Annie and everything. He didn't actually want to stop just because of that and everything. That is something I can actually see Thomas doing and such. And again, the way they handle it was actually pretty good.
Which episode was it?
I think what was it called, emergency cable or something like that.
Thomas and the emergency cable. Oh yes, I remember that episode. Season 18, yeah. I believe.
Yeah, yes, I believe that's the one.
Oh yes.
But yeah, and even in the model series, I think in the model series they were definitely best used for Thomas Saves the Day and everything, because like I said, that episode really does show how much like Thomas Thomas really means to Annie and Clarabelle and everything, and how much Annie and Clarabelle means to Thomas and such.
It's a shame that I was pretty harsh to that episode when I reviewed it when I first reviewed it at 13 years old.
Yeah. but like you said, you were young, just like Thomas, and like you learn from your mistakes, and now you're
Yeah,
a better person.
much better. And now I learned to take things with a grain of salt, basically.
Pretty much, just like try to take things on like as your own review and everything, and just try to be as more honest as you can and such.
Yeah, and you notice that I got it a lot better because when we first started doing reviews together, I was kind of new to writing scripts and everything, and I thought the best way to record a review was basically do it by memory, but however, that is even more difficult.
Yeah, pretty much. Especially when you're gonna get to like episodes that you haven't seen in a while. Just going off by memory is definitely not gonna be a very good thing at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that you taught me that scripts was the best way to review something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, back to the story.
Anyway, back to the story and everything. So let's get off that track and get onto a new track. Anyway.
Wait,
Yeah,
I think we need to, we need to wait for the signalman to switch the points.
pretty much we need to wait till he gets to the point.
Anyway, go ahead.
Anyway, so yeah, I don't have too much to say on this. But yeah, thinking on your rating and looking back on it, it is pretty a solid story and everything. Is it the best out of the book? Not really. I wouldn't go that far.
No,
but at least in
honestly,
like but at least in terms of like a introduction to like the first book and everything, or at least the first story to this book and such, I should say. It actually does a pretty solid job on like capturing you on like what Thomas's branch line is and like what kind of adventures you are going to see from this branch line later on as the book continues and such. So with that, I'm also going to give it an 8 out of 10. So far it's an 8 for both of us.
Yep. So it's the first. So it's an 8 so far.
Alrighty, so far it's going pretty good. So
this is a good start. This is a pretty good start.
It is. Alrighty, so
now we get to a fan favorite story.
Yeah, it's a classic one. It's
Thomas Goes Fishing.
I was actually going to think of a joke and think of like what episode that like people hated, but whatever. Yeah, it's Thomas Goes Fishing. It was a bad joke anyway. So anyway, let's. So yeah, so for Thomas Goes Fishing, we learned that they're like on Thomas's branch line, there's a bridge where there's like a river, and everything, where people love to jerk fish out of the water and everything. So there's your dirty joke for today. You're welcome. Anyway, so basically, Thomas thinks that like it would be lovely to stop by and go fishing and everything. No, this is not going to be like a hidden entertainment episode or a horrible CGI episode where like it actually does go fishing. Don't worry, we're not don't worry, we're not that stupid yet. But anyway, yeah, he wants to go fishing, but Engine is just like, dude, you're a fucking Engine. Engines don't go fishing. You smoking pot or something? Thomas is like, yeah, yes, I am smoking pot. Smoke way too much pot, and the driver and fireman also smoked way too much pot. But they decided to go fishing anyway, because Thomas needs to get a drink and such. And somehow, I don't know how, but fish somehow ended up fishing, some of the fish.
That is something that I've always questioned. How did the fish get into the bucket? Because fish are very speedy, and they see something coming towards them, they swim away fast.
Maybe. Okay, here's what I think. Some fish are kind of speedy, but some fish are also kind of stupid. So maybe like so maybe they didn't notice the bucket was coming up like right below him, and somehow the fireman actually got like very lucky and everything that like he was actually able to fish up fish from a bucket, and they somehow landed on Thomas's tank. And Thomas is almost about to burst and everything, but don't worry, they found the fish in his tank, and they soon cooked the fish and eat up because sure, if I found fish on like inside an Engine's boiler and everything, I guess it would be safe to eat and everything.
Yeah, it would be safe to eat. I hope I don't have to go to the goddamn hospital after this.
To be fair, this is one or two things. One is a children's book, so they don't have to worry about going to a hospital. But two, this was also made like during the late 40s and early 50s, where basically no one really gave a shit about health codes. So
yeah, pretty much. That this was made when society was different. Yeah, so you have a point.
And we're definitely going to be seeing that. Moving on, though. Yep, go ahead. So Thomas Goes Fishing, again, it's a classic for a reason and everything. This is another episode we're definitely going to see, like, Thomas's, naive childlike, innocence and everything. Something that, like, and again, it's something I also point out in my review as well, too. This basically the episode where we're basically seeing Thomas, like, wanting to do something because like wanting to do something because like when he sees other people doing it, it looks fun, it looks cool. Like he's basically like hey, fishing actually looks pretty fun. I actually want to try something like that too. And then basically when he does go do it and everything, he soon finds out why like everyone's telling him that like engines don't go fishing and everything. And yeah, once he learns the hard way, that's when he's like, yeah, you know what, maybe I should not go fishing and everything. And again, that's another situation where like I'm pretty sure all of us like could understand and like relate to and everything. There are basically going to be some things where like you probably there's a reason why like certain people shouldn't do like certain things and everything for a reason. It's not just because like we're telling you don't do it just because. There's always a rhyme and reason for everything, and like I said, Thomas learned that rhyme and reason himself, and like I said, the way he's presented, like again, I give massive props to like Audrey for actually writing a way for like how Thomas like could actually go fishing without actually making him literally go fishing and such. Still try to keep it as real like as he could, but still also turn it into like a fun, silly story that actually still works very well to this day. And again, there's a reason why like a lot of people consider it a classic and such.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that this is not like a hit entertainment episode or a CGI episode. Because can you imagine?
Or actually, there's not like a calling all engines go like episode as well too. Because I could actually picture Thomas actually sitting down like on his buffers and everything. And
Oh God, no, no,
wheels.
no, no.
Hey Diesel, I caught a bite right here. Oh, that's great, Thomas. I caught a fucking shark. Anyway, but yeah. One thing that like this is more for the TV series and everything. But one thing I always wonder, where did that sign actually come from in the first place? Like who actually made it and like in the first place, or why did it leave it? And why did it just leave it on the track and such?
Danger, keep away.
Yeah, and of course this is the episode that spawned the famous meme.
Inspector, can you see fish?
Dun.
Dun.
So yeah, I don't really have too many other things to say. Like I said, the illustration, for this, story again, gorgeously done and everything. I like the way the water looks. They actually, Dalby actually got some really good angles as well too with the bridge. So, with the bridge. So again, like really good picture, solid story and everything. And actually, this is the only story in a book where you actually do get to see the Fat Controller himself. So again, that's also pretty interesting. But yeah, I don't really have too much to say. So for my rating for the story and everything, you know what? I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. This is a really solid, classic story right here for a reason. And again, like there's a reason people still remember it to this day.
Yeah, it is a memorable story.
Right.
Thomas Goes Fishing. It's a classic. What can you say about this episode that hasn't been said? Well, this story that hasn't been said already. Typical Thomas. Thomas wants to go fishing. Engines tell him that fishing is bad. Thomas doesn't listen. He tries it. Doesn't like it. The end.
Pretty much. And that's not just Thomas Goes Fishing. That's just basically the plot of like most Thomas stories, even in the Railway series and even in the Classic series. It wasn't just something that like it wasn't.
And
just
this story, definitely unintentionally did something, that became a gag in the TV series, and that is Thomas's Thomas's disgust for fish.
Actually, yeah, you're right. Like pretty much after this story, like yeah, he felt uncomfortable, but like he never really had like a hatred for fish or anything like that. Whereas like in the TV series, definitely starting with like season 4 and everything, like you definitely do get more of a feeling on why Thomas about like after that incident, Thomas is never gonna like fish ever again. And quite frankly, like I don't blame him for like having that instinct anytime he hears the word fish.
Yeah, and I think the creme de la creme where he really despises fish is in the season 8 episode of the same name.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I still love that episode, to be honest.
I don't know. Like, was there any episode in the CGI series where Thomas also still didn't like fish? I can't think of any off the top of my head though.
I'll have to take a look at it because I'm the Thomas expert of the both of us.
Yeah, but
I'll have
yeah.
to take a look at it because
I,
it's been a while since I've seen, season 17 through 20.
yeah, as far as I know, off the top of my head, from what I remember in the CGI series, I think his hatred for fish wasn't present in the CGI series anymore. I
It,
could be wrong though,
I
but
think I think they brought it back in the Big World Big Adventures movie for one very brief scene. That's all.
alrighty.
Yeah, but anyway, I can't think of anything else to say about Thomas Goes Fishing. I do love the illustration of where Thomas looks like he's about to burst. This
Actually, like yeah, I'm actually glad you brought it up. Yeah, that's another thing that Dobby really did really well too. Actually showing that Thomas is not having a very comfortable time right now and everything.
yeah,
He actually captures his pain really well.
definitely. And so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. The story speaks for itself. It's a great story, and you know what? I'm gonna give it a 9.
Oh, 9 for both of us as well.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so far in terms of on both of us, we both so far it's a 17 out of 40, which is still pretty good.
Yep, definitely. We're on the right track. No pun intended.
That's all the puns intended. We make bad puns here. Anyway, so yeah, up next for you, it's Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow.
Yep, Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. Yep. So Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow, we get introduced to this new character called Terrence, and basically from the start, Thomas is a racist to him.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So basically, it's basically Thomas tells him that he's got ugly wheels, and Terrence says that he can go wherever he likes with them. And then basically the story kind of takes like a different route where we see Thomas's Thomas's, how can I say this? I'm sorry.
I would say Thomas's little again, this is more his naive, innocent brain thinking when he sees Snow for the first time, thinking that oh, this is just silly soft stuff and everything. What's there to worry about?
Yeah, pretty much. And also we get introduced to something that Thomas really hates.
Snowplows.
So yeah, we get introduced to something that Thomas really hates, and that is his snowplow. And basically, he destroys it to the point where it's unusable. and basically, without a snowplow, he basically gets stuck on a snowdrift, and basically Terrence rescues him, and then Thomas acknowledges that Terrence is pretty useful. That's it.
I also like how the driver. I also like how the driver is just Thomas, are you gonna learn your lesson and everything? And Thomas is like, no promises. I'm probably gonna fuck up again, but sure, I learned this time.
Yeah. So Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow. I want you to go first on this one because there was something I remember seeing your season 1 review that just didn't click with me. I just want to get a little bit of information on you first.
Alrighty, go ahead.
Alright, so Thomas, Terrence, and the Snow for me, it's a pretty good story, and I also like the TV series episode, even though I don't like that Terrence has this stupid smile on his face all the goddamn time. It's a good story for what it is, honestly. And Terrence is a good character, I will admit, but I don't think he's used that well in the story, if you think about it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's really talk about this real quick, and I think this is also going to be something for, again, because even in the Railway series, for as much as we do love the Railway series and everything, even the Railway series sometimes suffers from, good characters, or at least good characters' ideas, but they don't really get used to, the full advantage and everything, and sometimes ends up getting, forgotten and such. We're definitely going to be seeing this too, with a couple of Chris's books as well too.
I think Terrence is used. I think Terrence is used very well in Chris's books, but in this story, I think it was just a wasted potential.
Well, actually, you go first. So go ahead and finish your thoughts.
I think it was a wasted potential. You could have done so much more with Terrence and Thomas. This story could have been basically Thomas, after, like I said, Thomas was a racist to him, basically saying that he's got ugly wheels, and basically there could have been like a story opportunity where basically Terrence gets back at Thomas, where basically says after Terrence rescues Thomas from the snow, Terrence would say, so who's better now? Basically, making Thomas feel embarrassed and everything, and
Yeah, yeah, you know what? Like, it definitely would have been interesting, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad it didn't go that route and everything, because, like, because to be fair, like, yeah, even if they were to go that route and everything, and even if Thomas, did feel embarrassed and such, I don't think it really would have added too much, at least in terms of, like,
Actually, yeah, you're right. Because the more I think about it, the more if they went in that direction, it would kind of feel like no one learned anything in the end.
pretty much. And like I said, like, it is one of those stories where it's just like, it's just like, yeah, Terrence wasn't used all too much, but at the same time, like, I think he was used just enough in this story. Because, like, I actually do like how, like, in the book that, like, Thomas actually, tries to be friendly with him, but, like, anytime, I can just imagine, like, anytime Thomas puffs by, Terrence is just looking at him, planning, like, how he can murder him in his sleep later, just because, like, he didn't like his wheels and such. Yeah. I actually do like how Johnny Morris actually, makes the sound effects for, like, his wheels as well too.
It gets even more funny as the story goes on.
Pretty much. I also like too how he tries to, give Terrence almost like, a southern kind of, like, character and such.
Yeah, aside from Terrence not being used pretty well, in my opinion, I don't think the story has any more flaws. Maybe, perhaps, let's see. Perhaps I could. Nah. I think Terrence is my only gripe with the story itself.
Yeah.
Bec-
Yeah, cause like we both said and everything, like, there is some stuff you can do with Terrence, but I think Audrey used him. I think Audrey used him just fine in the story, because it would be admittedly, like, they would have put him in, like, in the middle of the story, or at least added another, conversation in the middle before, either Thomas gets a snowplow or Thomas, is about to rush into a tunnel and everything. Like, it probably would have dragged the story a little bit, but I think it probably would have been also a little better. Maybe it would have been a little better if, like, maybe, like, Audrey, like, wrote in and, like, Terrence saw Thomas going into the tunnel and such, and, like, that way, like, would be more, like, not necessarily interesting build up, or at least will be more, like, Big C will be a little bit more makes sense on why, like, on why the guard actually chose, Terrence instead of, like, another wrench to come in and help Thomas get unstuck in the snow and everything.
yeah, and this story also, well, in the TV series at least, this story also introduces kind of a character that we may see coming up, but I don't know.
Actually, the Railway series kind of introduced it a little bit too. We just don't, see him and everything. But it actually does also mention too that, like, a bus came and rescued the passengers.
Yeah.
I actually do like how in the TV series and everything, Thomas is, like, accident. It's a little bit more dramatic too, and then in, like, the book. Because, like, in the book, like, he gets stuck, but, like, in the TV series, he really does get stuck. Like, you can actually kind of, sense and feel that, like, he is actually stuck inside that snowdrift.
Yeah, I think the illustration doesn't convey the same emotion as what we see in the television series. Honestly, I do like the illustration where Thomas is stuck in the snow, but I think the TV series does a much better job in portraying that moment.
I definitely agree with you right there on that part and such.
Yeah.
Although, like I said, I actually also do like on how, like, Thomas the Snowplow looks and everything. Again, it's another iconic one that's, again, iconic for the right reasons and such.
Yeah, and I don't know why the fuck they I don't know why the fuck they changed it and It's Only Snow, but that's another topic for another day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So for Thomas Terrence in the Snow, the Terrence, kind of makes my rating go down a little bit. But I'm still going to be generous to the story because I still like the story, and it's very memorable, too.
Yeah.
So, after thinking about it long and hard, I'm probably going to give it a 7.
Alrighty. For me personally, yeah, like I said, I do agree that, like, it is a shame that, like, Terrence wasn't used all too much, and, like, because pretty much after this one, we don't see him ever again in, like, Audrey's story at all and such, except for like Thomas's Christmas party. But that was just because like Britt and David commissioned him to write the story in the first place.
And we don't see him again. And we don't see him again until, in terms of the Railway series, we don't see him again until Toby Trucks in Trouble.
Pretty much, and which again speaks a lot about like how much Audrey was able to use him to begin with and everything. So, like I said, I do like how he was set up at least a little bit in the intro. So it wasn't like it definitely would have been a lot more worse than suddenly like we never saw Terrence at all, and then somehow like he shows up right in the end and everything. That definitely would have made like the story much worse and everything. So so at least there was build up and such, and again going for illustrations and everything. I actually do like how, like, in the first illustration where snow does happen, it looks really gorgeous and such. Like,
yes. Oh,
I don't know what it is, but, like, I'm always a sucker for, like, winter feels and everything. And, like, again, Dalby, really knocked that feel out really good.
He absolutely fucking did. Oh, yes. I have to agree.
He did.
Yeah.
So, basically, for my own rating, the story itself is fine. Again, it's another story where, like, Thomas is acting like, a bratty little kid and everything. Thinks he knows better than anyone. Gets into, like, another situation. And again, I like how a driver's just like, have you learned your lesson? And Thomas is basically, in a sense, like, not really, no, but I'm just gonna say yes, just so, like, I can shut him up. but pretty much, yeah, for me, as for this story, you know what? I'm gonna be a little bit more generous with this one and everything. I'm actually gonna give it. I am actually gonna give it an 8 instead. So, because like I said, while the Terrence flaw, like it's a pretty, noticeable flaw and everything. It's not really all too big. At least not as big as I probably made it. As probably as I made it out to be in a TV series and everything.
Yeah, because in your season 1 review, you gave it a 6 out of 10. I remember that.
Yeah, which looking back on it and everything, like I think it was just like I said, more for like you said and everything too. It's just more for like because even in the TV series, we only see Terrence once in the beginning, and like we don't see him ever again.
Yeah, well,
it's like I said, my point still stands about like the title should have been more like Thomas and the Snow instead of Thomas Terrence and the Snow, or even Terrence the Tractor.
Pretty much.
All right, so you gave it a 7, so that means so far your final score is a 24 out of 40, and I gave it an 8, which means mine is a 25 out of 40.
You're 1 point ahead.
1 point ahead.
All right, now the big one. The big one.
Here we go. The story all of you have been
waiting for.
That's right. We're gonna review Wonky Whistles. I don't know why this was in the Railway series to begin with, but I guess the Reverend Audrey want to kind of like end this out on a very
What the fuck did you just say? What the fuck did you just say?
No, it's Thomas and Birdie.
Ah, okay. Because if it was Wonky Whistle, I would have fucking punched my laptop right now.
Can you imagine if like the Reverend Audrey was actually the real reason Wonky Whistles even existed to begin with?
If Wonky Whistle was in the Railway series, I probably wouldn't have started this podcast to begin with. Well, we basically.
Yeah, pretty much. So pretty much Thomas and Birdie, and I'm actually gonna steal a little something because it actually summarizes the story better than like any of us could. So Thomas challenged Birdie to a friendly race one day. The driver
said, "Get ready, but be careful on the way." The friends line up together and join in the fun. The station master called out, "Are you ready to begin?"
Should we keep going to the third verse or just stop?
Yep, let's go.
All right.
1, 2, 3.
He sped along the way, but
Thomas tried so hard to catch him on the way. Eventually he passed him, and Birdie had to say, "To pass you over that hill, Thomas, had wings like an airplane."
And yeah, pretty much that's the story in a nutshell.
Let's have a race.
Thank you, Mike and Junior, for the actual summary for us. We didn't actually have to do anything.
Pretty much.
But yeah, Thomas and Birdie, again, this is another classic for the right reason. And again, me speaking for me as a kid who actually had like 10 years of Thomas VHS and everything. This being the first story, like really was a bang up job to like start off like 10 years of Thomas and everything. like I said, even coming back to the story, it's a really fun story, very simple and everything, and yeah, I can't really say much more to that than there already is. The illustrations actually do make the story again, look really pretty and everything. Like the dialogue as you read along, as Thomas and Birdie, race along, you feel the excitement as you go along. And like I said, the TV series knocks it out of the park with its models and everything, and even with the narration for both Ringo and George. Again,
But
they both really shine.
you know what's the best part? Can I say it?
Go ahead.
Say it with me. The music.
Yes, the music. The music really shine in that episode, definitely by a long shot.
Definitely, I have to agree.
Yes. And like I said, even in the Railway series, the illustrations really did a bang-up job too on capturing the race as best as it could. I definitely love one of the illustrations where you get to see the river in between the rail and the
Oh my goodness,
that was really nicely painted.
I fucking love that illustration, man.
It works. It really does work.
It does.
And again, I really do love the little banter and dialogue you get to see in between, Thomas and Birdie. You really do get the sense that, they're kind of having a friendly race and everything. And it's even mentioned in the end how much, even Birdie lost. He had tons of fun. And, then, Thomas eventually agreed with him that, hey, yeah, you know what? Maybe you and I can be, good friends. Maybe you and I can actually help each other out and everything. Thomas and Birdie does show on it definitely does show real well on how Thomas and Birdie even became friends in the first place.
Thomas and Birdie are two characters that even as a kid, I've always wanted to see more episodes with them together. Because
same. I think all of us, pretty much wanted more of them even as a kid. I think even both the classic series and even Hit knew this, because they did try to show Birdie. They did try to show Birdie as much as they could and everything, especially in the CGI series too. The first time that we got to saw Birdie in his new role and everything. He and Thomas still works off really well with each other and everything too.
Thomas's shortcut being a really good episode with them together.
Pretty much, pretty much, yeah. So it's one of those iconic duos, a train and a bus and everything. Again, much like with Thomas and Percy or Thomas and James, isn't Mr. Duo that you remember for good reasons, because the episode that introduced them really started both of them off very strong.
Oh yes, and after that they have more races, but I think we can all agree that the first race was definitely the best one they've ever had.
Definitely. And I actually do like to acknowledge, so okay, let's all go ahead and mention this right now. The reason why the story actually ever came to be about in the first place was because, believe it or not, this story was based on a board game and everything that the Reverend made for his children and such. And basically, the children complained that the race wasn't fair. And again, this is basically where the idea of Sodori, is slowly gonna start, coming up into Audrey's brain, because Audrey had to come up with a way to make the race as fair as he could. So he mapped out the best way that he could on how both Thomas's branch line and the road that Birdie used and everything can make the race fair enough to where no one felt was getting a better deal and such.
I think actually, do I have a map of Sodor right here? Yeah, let's see. I do actually have a map of Sodor. Okay, so there you have it. Now let's take a look and see where the race actually started. I think it starts at Tidmouth.
I do know Elsbridge is part of Thomas's branch line.
Yeah. So so we basically
there's Farquhar. I'm sorry, not Farquhar. Farker.
Yeah. Okay, so it starts at Tidmouth, then we go into Nafford, then we go to Dryaw, Toyrek, Elsbridge, Hackenbeck, and finally the terminus is at Farquhar. So yeah, I think both of them had the same amount of obstacles, because there was a bridge that had that.
Yeah. There's basically a bridge that Birdie crossed as soon as Thomas left the station and such.
Yeah.
And let's see. After Elsbridge, I know there's another bridge right there where Birdie had to wait at a traffic light.
Yes.
And then we also got the hill where basically after Thomas Thomas had to lead advantage because he could just rush through a tunnel while Birdie had to climb a hill.
Yeah, basically, yeah, and that cost Birdie the victory because Thomas won. And
Which I also like to point out too, like again, like it's pretty interesting that even though that Audrey himself made the story and everything, it's pretty nice that he does acknowledge that such a race like that probably could not happen, at least not in the same scale as the story did and such.
no, not even close.
Yeah.
Not even close. Because there because speeding tickets, railway
Yeah,
regulation.
pretty much speeding tickets and engines can't really or at least they shouldn't run that fast.
And considering that, Wilbur Autry made sure that all his stories were as realistic as possible, I think this is one of the very few stories where he made an exception just because he wanted to make a good story. And lo and behold,
I think it's that yeah, he did want to make a good story because I think it's fair to say that he probably did have fun with the board game that his children he made for his children and he probably thought, well, you know what, I think just this once I'll put it into the book and everything, but I'll at least acknowledge that yeah, this won't actually happen in real life. Don't do this.
yeah, pretty much. And so yeah, going back to your thoughts, go ahead.
So yeah, like I said, you know what? After all that and everything, there's a reason why, in my season 1 review, I gave the episode a 10 out of 10. Because, like I said, it's a classic, it's fun, it's simple and everything. And again, there's a reason why even I remember it to this day. Why I always look forward to that episode. Anytime, season one was there, or at least there, was on a VHS or a DVD tape or DVD and everything. So, you know what? This story definitely does deserve a 10 out of 10 for me. So, yeah. So for right now, my final rating for this, so far it's a 35 out of 40. But I won't get the grade just yet. So go ahead and give your final thoughts.
Okay, so my final thoughts are.
I give you thoughts on the story first.
Okay, so oh sorry, yeah. So my thoughts on the story are gonna be pretty short because what can you say about the story that hasn't been said? Every time I think of the story, there's a big smile on my face, and because it's a really memorable and really fantastic story. There's a reason why this race became so popular. Well, the episode and the story became so popular. That the race is just so memorable.
Yeah, like we said, there's also a reason why too. Thomas and Birdie became a really good duo with each other as well too, because like I said, they both work off of each other very well, and even in their banter, you could tell that that they are really good friends.
Yeah, definitely.
And like I said, I definitely love how season 3 captured their friendship so well in some of the episodes.
Yeah, and remember that I said that my all-time favorite railway series, well, my all-time favorite illustration from this book is in this story. Well, it's the illustration where Thomas is passing the crossing.
I can definitely see why you do love that illustration so much. Again, I think it's just the way Dalby scales it up to where you feel that Thomas is a real big engine compared to a little bus like Birdie.
Yeah, I think the scale is the thing that steals the show for me. You can tell that these are real engines. Well, sort of.
Well, at least real enough in that they're real minus the fact that they can talk and they have faces.
Yeah, but they're real trains. They don't come off the tracks. They don't use their wheels as hands or anything like that. But you get what I mean.
Yeah.
They're real trains, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So aside from that, I can't think of anything else to say because you nailed all my points pretty well. So I think you know what the story's gonna get.
0 out of 10. No.
No.
Yeah, 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Yep.
Alright, so for my yeah, I guess we'll go for my final score first. So, well, actually no, let's do yours first because I think I gave my final score last time with James the Red Engine.
Yeah.
So, alright, so for you, 34 divided by 40, that's an 85%, which is still a solid B. So, yep, you gave Tank Engine Thomas again a solid B.
Okay, that's actually pretty good.
All right, now me, like I said, I'm 1 point higher. So for me, it's an 87. It's basically an 87, 88%. So mine is a B plus, which is still a solid B. So both of us pretty much are giving this book in the B category, which is actually very fitting and such. This is another book that, again, like, is a classic for a reason. There's a reason why, these stories, like, all of them are still as memorable. It's a very good follow-up, too, for, like, the second book featuring Thomas the Tank Engine as well.
You can literally just go from book 2 to book 4 instantly. You don't have to read book 3 to,
Pretty much, because, again, outside of, like, James being mentioned and, like, Thomas and Birdie and everything, like, if you wanted to skip, James the Red Engine, go right ahead and do it. Like, just cut straight to, like, back to Thomas the Tank Engine again to see, like, what he's doing on his branch line and such. And I mean, Audrey was the kid in that forward where he said, like, the life on the branch line is far from dull. He actually really did, a real good job on, like, capturing, like, the fun little, antics that Thomas got up to in his branch line. And again, there's a reason. There's a reason why Thomas himself became popular, and there's also a reason why, his stories are still as popular to this day. Like I said, he captured his character very well. You could tell that, like, even during the story, that Thomas, does mature a little bit, as the story goes on. So, as a follow-up to, like, Thomas the Tank Engine, it's a really good follow-up.
It is. It's definitely a great follow-up to Thomas the Tank Engine.
And it's definitely a big better follow-up to James the Red Engine.
You can say that again.
It's a big follow-up to James the Red Engine.
And it may not be as good as the second book, but it's still good regardless. Very good in that.
It is, like I said, good stories. Again, like, outside of the one fuck up, the illustrations, again, like, were really, beautiful. Like, Dalby really did capture, like, the look on Thomas's branch line so well. Yeah. So, anything else? Any other final thoughts we want to give on this book before we sign off for today, or?
Yeah, I think we should wrap it up here because I think this is gonna be I think this so far this is probably our shortest episode so far.
You never know. You never know what the other book's coming up. Pretty soon. Actually, I think the only other book that might be, the shortest one is going to be the Christmas special because we only have to deal with one story with that book.
Yeah.
But we shall see when we get to that book.
Yeah, pretty much. So, anyways, guys, thank you for watching the 4th episode of the Really Useful Podcast. If you guys enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you guys want to see more episodes, hit that subscribe button as well. Also, don't forget to check out our 2 channels. Mine is Old Teapot 7. And I also leave a link to Zecoa the Diesel's main channel in the description below. And he also has a gaming channel, so also check that out in the description below.
So, yeah, thank you all so much for watching the episode. Next time when we come back, we're going to see the big engines being idiots and going on, quote-unquote, strike. We'll explain more of that when we get to that book.
Yep. That's week. We got Troublesome Engines.
Yep. And a book that introduces another favorite character among the fans.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, guys, this has been Bonnie here, my co-host.
Zecoa the Diesel.
Saying thank you for watching, and we'll be seeing you guys in the next week for Troublesome Engines. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you guys real soon.